Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the Asian Pacific Community Fund, my name is Christine Lee, and I want to welcome you for joining us today. Sorry again for a little bit of the confusion that happened. I was trying to add a last-minute addition to our calendar invite for today's webinar. It is still going on, which is why you're here. So we want to give folks maybe another minute to join us. If you could just keep yourself muted for now, but feel free to keep your video on so we know who's in the room. And please also change your profile to say your name as well as your organization. So again, our speakers know who is in the room. And we'll get started in just 1 minute. Thank you so much again for joining us and hope you're having a good day so far. Good morning, everyone. My name is Christine Lee with the Asian Pacific Community Fund. Thank you so much for joining us today for our API Nonprofit Capacity Building webinar on nonprofit loans in 2020. Is it strategic or stupid? We are very happy to have a couple of different speakers that are joining us today. But before we get started, just wanted to go over the agenda. So this is a Zoom meeting, which means that we are able to see you and hear you unless you choose to turn off your video. We will keep everyone muted for now during the presentation portion, but there will be a Q&A. And if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat box as we will be scanning them regularly. And there may be an opportunity for you to also raise your questions live. But for now, we ask that you keep your videos on, but keep yourselves muted, and please put your name and your organization so that way we know who's in the room. This is a program this is our API Nonprofit Capacity Building Program. And ordinarily this would be an in-person workshop, but because of the pandemic, we are offering them as a virtual webinar. So we thank you for your patience in dealing with the technology, but it does allow us to be able to bring in speakers that geographically, it may have been a little bit tougher for us to invite to a presentation in downtown. And we know that we have a lot of organizations throughout Los Angeles and Orange County that are joining us here today. This is really something that we offer free of charge to any volunteers, board members, or staff that work for nonprofit organizations serving our Asian and Pacific Islander communities, because we know that our nonprofits are the ones that speak our languages, know our cultures, and are the ones that are on the front lines responding to the immediate needs of our community members, especially our most vulnerable that are not receiving any help from the mainstream, whether it be government or other nonprofit organizations. So we want to ensure that this nonprofit sector that serves our API communities are not just around, but that you are thriving and surviving and can get through this pandemic. So we want to ensure that there are resources available for you that go beyond just funding to make sure that you have what you need in order to do what you do best, serving our community. So we want to thank you for, for setting aside an hour and 15 minutes of your time for this very important topic. This is a topic that we do not approach lightly, looking at nonprofit loans. And I know that loans, whether on a personal level or professional level, can be kind of a scary term for us to think about. But we know that these are very unusual times that we're living in. We know that almost 80% of you have had to cancel or reconfigure your fundraising events. Or not even sure what to do about them for this year or even for next year. And we know that a lot of our organizations survive on the unrestricted funding that you're able to raise from these fundraising events. We know that you've been impacted. We've heard from you from our API nonprofit capacity needs assessment survey that we did in April as well as in August. We know that many of our nonprofits have also suffered with layoffs, with having to reconfigure, not being able to spend down your contracts or your program grants, and while at the same time donations have been down and you're not able to have your fundraising events. So one option that we did want to put on the table and explore today was looking at lending and financing for nonprofit organizations. So I'm very happy to introduce a couple of speakers from an organization called Lend Donate. So Vivian Xu is the founder and CEO of Lend Donate, and previous to this, she was a senior VP of US Trust, as well as the VP Senior Portfolio Manager at Charles Schwab Investment Management. And several other companies, including the Schwab Hedge Equity Fund, where she was the lead portfolio manager there. So she comes with a wealth of experience in this particular field, knowing what it means to do lending as well as financing for organizations and businesses. But she also has a heart for the community and for nonprofits, having been a full-time volunteer development director at the Women's Initiative for Self-Employment and serving on many different boards, including the Los Altos Community Foundation, How Women Lead, the SRI Conference, and the Haas Alumni Network. She herself is a Berkeley grad, having gone there for both her undergrad, getting a BS in Applied Mathematics, as well as an MBA in Haas School of Business. And today she is joined by Lynette Pang, who is a Chief Operating Officer at Lend Donate. She has 20 years of experience at American Century Investments, having been on the discipline equity team and a portfolio manager there. She also has previous experience at MSCI Barra and State Street Bank. But again, just as Vivian has a heart for the community, she also has volunteered for many different nonprofit organizations and has been a tax return preparer for low-income households. She is on the board, she has been on the board for State One Theater and Music for Minors too, and she comes with a BS in Agricultural and Managerial Economics, as well as a minor in Statistics from UC Davis. And both women are also a CFA charter holder. So I'm very pleased to introduce Vivian as well as Lynette, and I'm going to turn it over to them. Please join me in welcoming both of our speakers.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you for that extensive introduction. It's so good to be with you, and the accolades sound like it's not us. So we're excited to be with you. As Christine had mentioned, these are, of course, very difficult times for everyone. And with our experience, we want to just share some of our knowledge of what we have done and what we've seen with you, and definitely want to make this very interactive. Before we even start my full disclosure, I need to figure out the technology, and let me share my screen. Let me see. I can't share my screen just yet, I think. I'm getting, so while maybe I'm given that ability to share screen, and I will tell you a little bit more about Lend Donate. I started the company in late 2015. And the idea came to me when I was really in the donor role. So I was at a fundraiser, we're all very familiar with that, and I was hearing the presentation from a school saying that they were looking to move from leased property to purchased property. They had identified all the capital stack that needed to make that happen, right? They raised capital campaign money, they got a bank to say, we'll lend you this much. There was a small gap to enable the whole thing to work, but they didn't have it yet. And I think in the grand scheme of like a $16 million project, they were missing just half. So I thought, you know, why not crowdsource from the people at the fundraiser at Crabfeed and see if we can help provide some capital to as a short-term loan, bridge them over so that they can purchase the property, and then when they have the money, they'll pay us back. So the idea started from that. I researched a little bit. It turns out nobody was provided that service that I could find to help us do something like that. So after a while of soul searching, kind of doing some research myself, I decided to quit my job and start the company, and Lynette joined me shortly after that. So that's a little bit of context beyond just words. Let me see.
So Vivian, you can go ahead and try sharing now.
Okay. All right. Can you see the screen, the title slide? Just double checking. Can everyone see my screen? Oh no, I'm not.
Yes, we can all see it.
All right, thanks. I need a little feedback because now I only see the, I don't see you guys anymore. I see the my title slide. So, okay, I picked this title, of course, to be a little catchy. Why call anything stupid anyway? So you'll see. Let me give you us a roadmap as to what we plan to share today, and the way that Lynette and I figure out maybe how we think we'll want to make this interactive and efficient is I'll do the talking. Lynette is like she always does with theater. She's a very good stage manager. She is operating the chat box. So we encourage everyone to fully utilize the chat box, post questions. It can be in private. So you feel that it's something that you just kind of want to ask a question privately, you can just direct it to her, Lynette Pang, and then she can get back to you. Feel free to put in as many questions as you want or need. And then if we don't get to it during the live session, we'll get back to you afterwards. We'll also share our email addresses at the end. Okay, so that's housekeeping. 5 broad areas that we want to share today. One is, of course, just to reflect back on this year, how particularly nonprofits have been impacted, and that, we use the title strategic. What really makes something strategic? We'll spend just a little time on that to set the stage. And then we'll share some tangible goals of strategic goals that nonprofits we've worked with have, and how the solutions have helped them. And hopefully to give people ideas for yourselves, as well as, of course, for questions during this live session. And then the fourth one is we want to just even put it out there. What are some new ways to engage your donors or new donors? And finally, we'll present just some high-level actionable steps for you to take after this webinar. Okay, so first of all, you heard about us. So let's see who's in the room. And thank you everyone for filling out the survey. And so I chose these a couple of pictures to illustrate who is in the room. 19 of you responded. And so on the left-hand side are the organization sizes that you represent. A majority of you are with an organization with operating budget, annual budget of about $1 million or less, and a few, larger ones. And then the right-hand side is I oftentimes think about that in what we do, is what percentage of your revenue comes from earned versus contributed, donated income. And it's not to say earned is better or contributed is better. That's not how we look at it. But what is necessary when we evaluate the financial strength of a nonprofit is that the organization, whatever the model, whether you're usually 50-50 or 90-10, either way, that you're consistently with your ability to source your revenue in the methods that you think you should. And so let's take a look at who's here. Majority are contributed revenue-based models. And in case you're wondering, well, let's say your number is 60-40 or 100% contributed, and you want to benchmark that, like, is that a good number? That's actually a very good question to ask yourselves and to work with your treasurer, CFO to look at that. A good place to find benchmarking information for that, I mean, there are multiple places, but an easy place to go grab that could be from the Nonprofit Finance Fund survey. NFF, we can share the links later on. So, but if you just Google Nonprofit Finance Fund survey, it's a survey done by them every other year. So the latest survey was as of 2018. In 2018, I did a quick look from their survey. On average, the LA area, the nonprofits have 60% of their revenue earned. Now then, before you go like, oh, well, we're very different, and you should. It's a wide range. As you can see, your organizations get your revenue in very different ways. If you are a grant type of people, you have strong grant writers, and you will get most of your grant that way. And if you are operating fees for service, then you will be on the other side. So I won't belabor that point, but that's just a side note on how we look at nonprofits. You already heard about us. Lynette and I have actually before here, we worked at 2 other companies before. We really do have very complementary skill set. At the same time, we have very much in line mission and goals, which is that we want to make affordable capital available to nonprofits and create efficiency in this whole funding system. All right, well, let's start with 2020. So I know the SWOT analysis is a love-hate. Some people love it and some people hate it. Regardless, we're going to just use this for a quick assessment of what 2020 landscape looks like and beyond that. I think all of us can agree that no matter what, for most of the organizations, all prior projections need to be reassessed. If not all of us, I think probably all need to be reassessed, whether it's your expense, near-term, short-term, your revenue sources, near-term, short-term, as well as your strategic goals. Do they need to change? I'm on the board of a nonprofit where 90% of our prior revenue were all earned. We had in-person conferences, meetings, and it's all earned income from that. And when COVID hit and we couldn't meet in person, there was panic at first. Panic is probably an understatement. So then PPP helped and all those things helped. But the leadership was, the CEO and COO were very quick to assess opportunities. And so I'm happy to say that now back, I think even in summer, we completely turned it around to from our revenue source, instead of a few, let's say 5 in-person conferences a month or, meetings a month, we turned up the volume of meetings at a smaller scale, all virtual. And then the revenue now is actually even more so than we had before. Because of physical location limitations before, our events were all localized to Bay Area. And now we are getting attendees nationwide and actually sometimes even beyond the US border. So, that's why the SWOT analysis can be helpful. Let's look at the strength. So the strength of 2020, most of you responded that you had received some PPP. That's a forgivable loan, so that's a good thing. We know that donations have increased in 2020 so far. There's a recent article by Chronicles of Philanthropy, and we can also share that link, that show that as of the first half of 2020, donations were up 7.5% compared to the same time in the previous year. So that's good. There are also downsides to that, or threats to that. I'll come to that point. I guess, it's hard to find strength in 2020. So I did find, okay, some select expenses were reduced, such as travel and maybe some other overhead costs were reduced. But what about the weaknesses? I think we're all very painfully aware. For many of us, earned income has been down. Employee retention is a concern. Many of the employees are tapped out. Maybe they're, they have to stay home with the children who can't be in school for many reasons. Employee retention is going to be potentially a weakness now and into the future. And for some, the debt and financial obligations have increased because you were getting maybe rental revenue from somewhere while you were paying for leased property, but the revenue is gone, but you still have to maintain a debt obligation. So all kinds of challenges. Let's look at the opportunities. Opportunities are, donors are innovating. So I don't know if you've heard, I'm just going to quickly share some of the cool things some of the major donors have done. Let me see. All right. So there is a program that I participated in. So I have a donor advice fund at the Community Foundation I'm on the board for. And so there's a movement called Half My DAF, encouraging people to make donations, empty out your donations, at least half, empty out your donor advice fund accounts, at least by half. And then this organization will select, randomly select a few to match donations. So I was one of the lucky donors that actually had more than one of my recipients receive matching grants. Ford Foundation announced that they issued bonds. So they are borrowing money to the tune of $1 billion in the public market and to use that money to increase their grant making. I think everybody will agree, nobody has ever done it like that in that scale, that an organization would take the step to borrow money so they can give it away. So definitely high kudos to Ford Foundation, and they've also inspired other foundations to do the same and join them. So I think in the end, they sold $1.7 billion in bonds so that they can increase in donations. And one more local for you guys, Magic Johnson has also stepped in to help the PPP program. So we all knew that maybe there were like the two phases of PPP, and Magic Johnson had read that some of the smaller nonprofits, especially serving minorities, missed out on some opportunities. So he decided to donate $100 million and provide the funding to SBA to give out as additional money for the PPP program. So that's the opportunity I'm talking about. There are a lot of just brainstorming ways to see if you can engage donors in a different way, because they're trying to do more than they have in the past. Interest rates are at an all-time low. So in case you are also thinking about taking out a loan for whatever reasons, this is a good time, potentially. And the virtual expansion that I talked about, maybe you were local before and now you can. And then also PPP has stimulated some people's ideas. Loans can be forgiven. Sorry, I can't see the screen. So if you are not on mute, please kindly put yourself on mute. So loan forgiveness is an idea that's new to some people. So I'll spend some time later on talking about that. But there are still threats looming. So if you serve in an area that is not considered essential, you may be suffering, already have suffered, and you will say, yeah, you don't have to tell me, right? So example, oftentimes people point to our arts. They can't perform, they can't be out there earning their 70% earned income, but then at the same time, they may be paying for a lease of their museum or the performance center, whatever it is, they're suffering. Donations are going elsewhere. In-person service organizations could be at risk because of lost revenue, because maybe even permanently, because you can no longer have that space that you use the space as you could before. And there's a threat, I'm not saying this will happen, is that with the increase in donation, everybody jamming donations in 2020, it is still a great big unknown whether future donations will crash, meaning that I fast-tracked my donations from future years, and next year and in the future, I'm just going to donate a little less. So those are threats, may or may not happen. All right, I feel like I've talked for so long, and it's now time for you to engage. And then I'm going to ask Christine or whoever's doing this to help me pop up a few of the poll questions before we actually dive into the meat of strategic, stupid, or maybe neither. So some of the decisions so just keep answering these questions as I talk. Some of these decisions are day-to-day, and sometimes they come in once in a while. And so there's not, actually, I don't want to give away. So see what you think. Is this a strategic move? Is it a stupid move? Or is it neither? So do you think applying for a credit card is? So we'll keep this flowing as long as maybe, majority of people have responded. Then let's move on to the second question. I have 4 of these very quick, rapid, lightning questions. I don't know. Yeah, okay, let's see. Okay, strategic and neither. Okay, very good. All right, let's go on to the next one. Do you think tapping into your line of credit is? So assuming, you can say neither if you don't have a line of credit, or you just, hypothetically speaking, if you have a line of credit and now you need cash flow, should you tap into your line of credit? All right, let's take a look. All right, wow, split. Okay, great. All right, let's keep going to the next one. Do you think receiving a loan from your board member is, I don't know if anyone's done it or have heard about it. Sometimes in a bind, board members do give private loans to the organizations they support. Ah, also split. Very good. I love it. Okay, last question. Should you pay off your mortgage now if you have the cash? All right, let's see. Ooh, neither. I love it. Okay, very good. Okay, let's get to some discussion questions of why I asked those questions and the framework that I plan to use. By the way, this image, I don't know how many people know, this is from a really cute baby board book called No No Yes Yes. There are a lot of no nos and yes yes to help kids understand. Oops, let's see. Oh, here we go. All right. So first of all, I want to say that I am making a distinction about being strategically on your program versus strategically with your financials. They, of course, should go hand in hand. If you have some strategic expansion plan, let's say 3-year, 5-year expansion plan, you need the financial methods to support the expansion or anything, So yes, financial and the actual programming should be aligned. But today I will focus just on the financial aspect and touch on the programming as they relate to the financial, bigger picture. So what's usually strategic is involves something that's about long-term vision, taking some innovative actions, and it needs to have to be based on defined, realistic, and actionable plans. Okay, so I think we can probably all understand that. What is stupid is when it's self-inflicted wound. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'll have one slide on this, but it's when an organization or people, we take unnecessary and damaging actions that comes back to haunt us. So I'll share some examples there. I'm so happy to see that a lot of you answered neither on some of those, right? Because sometimes the word is, it depends, right? So whether to take use your credit card or tap into your line of credit really depends. What do those things depend on? A lot of times depending whether you have identifiable source of repayment. So here's some things that we also won't talk about today, but we're happy to answer your questions offline later on if you have these questions. General best practices. So having a line of credit is important for the health of an organization. A lot of community banks offer a line of credit without fees if you don't have balance. So seek them out. In times of need, you may need that I have an example later, but you may need that can come in handy. Cash management, projecting forward where your shortfall might be, maybe is in 18 months, there will be a shortfall. Having that long-term vision is generally just best practice. We've reviewed over, I don't know how many financial statements of nonprofits. Those that are doing well tend to have a pretty good handle on optimizing their accounts receivables and accounts payables. Sometimes we see that they're paying out on time all the time, but it takes them 120 days to collect. Now, sometimes it's just the nature of the work that they do, and sometimes they're maybe too nice. It's like, oh, okay, well, we'll follow up on that invoice when we get to it. So make sure your process is, buttoned up so that you're not financing, other people. And then finally, of course, it's a good idea always to be thinking about if you already have debt, when the interest rates are low, whether this is time just to refresh, like what we do with our homes, and refresh and get a lower rate. All those things are what I consider best practices, not our primary focus today, but something to keep in mind. Again, I've been talking for a long time. It would, right now, if you want to use the chat box just to share maybe that you had pre-COVID That may or may not still be going on, but just let's share some of the ideas that you guys have had before COVID was a strategic plan, and I'll keep going. All right, so I promise that so to share a little bit about stupid. Again, not that I want to use that word, but it's just a little catchy. What are some things that organizations have actions that have taken that may not be so wise? First of all, if you take a loan, first check to see if it's controversial within your organization. Christine, in her opening, said it perfectly. Just like people, some people feel comfortable with debt and some people don't. Your board may feel perfectly comfortable with debt because they see it as strategic, is a way to get your strategic vision fulfilled, and others don't. So make sure it's not controversial, nor is it somehow against anything in your bylaws. Second one is that, is it just a temporary fix for a long-term problem? Line of credit, all those short-term things are good and are handy, but we've worked with nonprofits where they kept tapping into that temporary cash flow bucket, the line of credit, to keep hiding more systemic problems, and that's not good. Is it just to keep up with appearances? So here's a thing that's pretty real. Sometimes, you're in a very unique space, or that your peers are expanding, and you want to appear also as that you are expanding, whether physically or program-wise, and you may not have the funding just yet, but you're hoping to get it. So organizations have taken out loan to keep up with appearances. And again, if without a definitely plans and identifiable source of repayment, that's may come back to haunt you. Is it a last-ditch effort to save the organization? So I've been on a board in the past where we had to decide whether to shut down an organization. All options were on the table. So when that happens is when governance matters a lot. Think about whether if you do take out a loan, whether it's from the board or from a bank or whoever else, whether that's just a last-ditch effort, or is there really a tangible plan that you can use it as a tool as opposed to the last thing you do. And then finally, the repayment, again, back to the source of repayment. Sometimes is, okay, well, I know that grant will come. They've told us that it will come, or that big donor, now they're just overseas. I know them when they come back to the US, they will give us a grant. I've heard it all. And so make sure that it's not just hope, that there is something tangible. Then you can use a loan strategically, fast forward the cash flow so that you can pay it off later. Okay, so enough of that. Now we're going to shift gears and then talk about actionable plans and how Lendonate, we feel that our innovation can be helpful and how we have helped others. So we'll watch a very quick video, less than 2 minutes, to explain how it all works. And then we have a few use cases of successful applications by nonprofits doing what I just kind of described, strategic use of loans. And then I'll even share one failed attempt and why. But before we go on, Lynette, do we have any questions in the chat box or anything else you think we should do before we go to that the video?
In the chat box, people shared some of their strategic plans that had changed because of COVID. And examples are like investing capital, like buildings, and hiring new staff, upgrading hardware. All understandable.
Yeah, very understandable. And before the session started, I know I was just chatting with Christine and others that whether we are seeing nonprofit applications coming in, right? So understandably, there were some strategic moves. We were working with multiple nonprofits in helping them acquire new buildings. Financing them, and they've decided to just take a pause. It doesn't mean it won't go. It just means that, well, we couldn't have that gala in person, so we don't know how our capital campaign is going to pan out. So I think it is a strategic decision to take a pause, maybe not entirely scrap your previous plan, but to reassess. Okay, thanks for that. So again, okay, I'm gonna now challenge I'm gonna mute myself and then go to the video.
Lendonate is a new kind of investment opportunity that maximizes your positive social impact. Our platform connects lenders and donors to nonprofit organizations with great project ideas that need a financial boost. At Lendonate, we believe in communities. We all need the schools that launch our children into bright futures, the local health organizations that keep us healthy, and the food programs that provide support to the most vulnerable in our cities. And sometimes they need us. Our community has 4 main players. Nonprofits or borrowers pitch their projects of at least $50,000 to Lendonate for placement in our marketplace. Lendonate's team of professionals screen the financial security and potential of each organization to ensure our marketplace has a robust offering of strong opportunities. In some cases, sponsors provide financial backing that helps a borrower qualify for the platform or qualify for a lower interest rate. And then lenders make their bids through our secure online platform. Once a loan is complete, the nonprofit can get to work on an impactful new project, and lenders will start to see a return on investment. But the work doesn't stop there for Lendonate. We work behind the scenes to service the loan so that the money gets back to the lender to use as capital for future funding and create new opportunities in the marketplace. If you're a lender looking for a new way to engage with organizations around the U.S., or if you are a nonprofit with a project of at least $50,000 who hasn't found the right solution, you're in the right place. Welcome to Lendonate. We can't wait to work with you to make the world a better place.
All right, I'm muting myself. All right, I'm back. So that's a very quick overview. Basically, we are an open platform that help nonprofits source loan and donation, matching them with interested capital in supporting them with either a loan or loan capital or donations or a combination. And we are that facilitator in between. Interest rates terms are very important. So with our expertise, what we do is we first assess the financial strength of the organization, what the amount of loan that you want to borrow, and we tailor make actually sometimes the terms and the presentation of a loan. We'll look at all that in a little bit. I find that sometimes it's just easier to look at a real case than just to talk conceptually. So let me go to the next page. All right, I'm going to use one of the loans that we did and spend a little bit more time on this one, explaining the structure, and then we can go through a couple more pretty fast with the same idea, but different applications. This organization, She Can, also is it's a local nonprofit here, helping bring women to U.S. colleges, get 4 years of education to be leaders in their own country. And the countries that they are brought from are the post-conflict countries. So they've had wars before, and so it's a really great organization. Their operating budget is similar to many of you. It's about $1 million in annual revenue. And their strategy, after having been in operations for a number of years, they decided to invest in a big donor gala that they hadn't done it at that scale before. And that took more investment and capital that they normally would for a small organization, because they needed to put down the down payment for those fancy hotels and the caterers and months in advance to hold the places. They didn't do it just out of hope. They actually did leverage off of their very strong network to have hosts to bring the potential donors. So they knew there were some big hitters that have already signed up to come. So with that confidence, they felt like, okay, rather than just continue to put, stressing them out. Actually, I think they put some of the cost initially on a credit card and feeling that, we just got to invest in ourselves. But we gave them an option. Rather than paying credit card rate, they took a $50,000 loan 3 months before the gala, so that replaced some of the credit card expenses, just a 6-month interest-only loan from us. And so just a minimal payment every month. And we help them source a loan interest rate below 3%. So recall from the video, we talked about how we would assess what the fair market interest rate would be. So let's just say, not for them, but let's just say it came back at 6%. Then the offers could come in and say, I love your organization. I don't need 6% interest rate from you. I just wanted 3. Or somebody may say 2 and somebody may say 6, right? So we take all the best offers so that the nonprofit ends up paying below that market rate. And at the same time, offers to donate could come in at the same time. So for them, again, to recap, big donor gala, they didn't, they were pretty sure they had some big hitters in the room that could donate. So then they decided, okay, we're going to do this. They take out this loan. Now, the board guarantee is a key feature in this case because of the nature of the nonprofit being smaller. Taking on $50,000 is pretty, pretty significant. And so one of their board members felt very strongly that their gala was going to be successful, that she personally guaranteed this loan. I'll leave some of the details aside. The guarantee provided for the security of the loan, bringing even that market rate down to be, very reasonable. And then with added people being philanthropic, their resulting interest rates was below 3%. So the outcome, the gala raised more than 6 times what they borrowed. So more than $300,000. What they borrowed, that's what they expected. They, instead of paying off immediately, they decided to let the cheap money ride a little longer. In fact, at the end of 6 months, they said, hey, actually, we have plans to grow our program. Can we then renew for another 6 months and then use it for that purpose? So actually, they did it twice. The second time was the renewal, and they grew the program, and then they paid it off, and then everybody's happy, and they're now debt-free and having expanded. I'm going to pause for questions. Let me actually stop sharing so I can see you guys. Because I went through a lot of the details of how we do things, let's see if we have questions before we go on to other cases and how they were used differently. All right.
I just wanted to comment, Vivian, that I thought that was a very interesting example because we know that with a lot of our small organizations, it becomes a very difficult decision to make on whether they, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic, hopefully, on whether they should have an annual gala. It's something that sometimes their board members demand, but it's such a huge investment of staff time and energy, half of your year spent planning on it, not just and that's not even mentioning the working capital that you need to put down, a down payment for a venue, for vendors, for, printing, all the things that you need that goes towards, paying off for an event. And at the end of the day, like some of the small organizations just break even, if at that. So I think it's a very interesting example that you bring up, because I think it's something that a lot of our organizations have to contend with, like how much, like, is this a good risk for us to take, knowing, like what is going to be the return on investment for us?
Yes, no, those are very good questions. And like many things, I'll say it depends whether it's a good idea to have a gala. Even 2020 aside, right? Because now, who knows? Virtual galas, we don't know how effective they are. It may be strategic to call it quits. Like, you've done the gala and you say, that's our marquee event. I know we lose money, but, people will miss it. All those things, maybe this is the excuse to stop it if you don't think financially it is going to be successful. Potentially, it is just like this organization said, this is a time to reach out to your strong supporter base and say, hey, you know, do a to next where you can, let's say virtual, pivot to virtual. Now, can you help us reach to your network in New York or in Texas or wherever? And now bring in, let's say, you know, in the context of your organization, the Asian community, Asian American community across the country, because they care about, let's say, Asian mental health or Asian elderly. And then now that's an opportunity and could be strategic. So yeah, so many things are, it depends. Great question. Any other questions? You can put yourself, you know, take yourself off mute. If you have even questions about how this platform works, before I go on to other cases.
Vivian, I want to ask that this is not the nature of APCA work. We don't do direct service, but I know many of the direct service agency, they get reimbursement based by the government contract. So I think this could be a good example because some of the government is so behind, and right now with pandemic, with the working from home, their efficiency actually going down. So nobody's getting back email as fast as they are. So same thing for processing the reimbursement check. It could be 3 months before, now become 6 months. So is that could be a good example going through your model about put that money up front, but you know your money coming back. It's almost like your equity line at the home, right? When you do refinance, you know you're gonna have money to pay back, but you don't know the time. Can you kind of talk about that so the nonprofit in this workshop can kind of see how that works for them? If those are the very secure contract they're gonna get, but they just don't know when they're gonna get their reimbursement check.
Yeah, very good question. Even before COVID, you guys know government checks are oftentimes late. I want to say, where did I see the statistic? I think it was on the Nonprofit Finance Fund survey. 50% of government grants are late. And then they, you know, late by 1 month, 3 months, 6 months. So this time is extra painful to have late checks. So the general advice I would give is that if you don't think that grant is jeopardized because of what is happening, then that potentially could be a way to bridge over funding gap or cash flow situations. And I can give, you know, I think in the next one, maybe I'll talk a little bit about, you know, funding that's about to happen. Can you strategically bridge over without incurring a lot of cost? Because cost, fees, you know, we all have in mind. I don't want to pay fees that I don't otherwise need to, not a dime more, right? But sometimes if we are overly conservative, it can come back to harm us as well. But that's a great question. If we know, you know, actually, there's an example I didn't include in here. We had another nonprofit that had a pending grant. Normally, we don't use pending grants as collateral because if the grantor changes their mind, whether it's a foundation and definitely not government, we can't go after the government, that source of repayments could go away, like, oh, you know, so we can't use that effectively. But in this case, we made an exception. There was a, this nonprofit only needed about $60,000 of loan. The grant pending for the following year was over $1 million. And they got the grant letter. It's from a foundation that has supported them over 10 years. And that foundation had decided to sunset. It's just like a private family. So, you know, we're not going to do this anymore. We're going to give out all our money and you will receive, like, I think $1.3 million. So that letter was in hand. But unfortunately for that, it didn't say when, it didn't have anything concrete that we could really use, and no bank would take it. So we decided we were going to present them. Disclosing the nature of the security is a grant letter and why it's impactful. Because without that, again, it could be, you know, detrimental to the organization, layoffs and other things. So we did that. They got the grant 7 months after they took the loan, and then they paid off the loan immediately. And so everybody, you know, it worked out and there was no undue stress. So yeah, it can be strategic, but yeah, with every loan, there needs to be considerations. I see that, I'm not looking, anybody raise hands, any more questions? Okay, so let me share screen again, and then we'll resume example number 2. Oops. Not the spreadsheet. Where am I? Okay, here we go. Okay, the second one is also a nonprofit in the broader greater LA. MEND has been around for more than 50 years, and they help low-income families to help them with resources, food, and other services. They had strategically decided to sell one of two buildings that they owned. The building they were selling was, over $3 million. It was it was underutilized, and so they said, okay, we're going to turn this to liquidate it and then use the money for the program. So very strategic about it. Everything was going well. They had a buyer and then a backup buyer, so it was not like a unwanted building. But the glitch was that you know how when you have buildings, there's environmental reports that need to be done, like appraisals. Environmental report showed whatever, and then they said, okay, we need to do level 2 environmental report. So it's delay after delay, and months go by from the targeted closing date, and still the sale was pending. So they were hurting for some cash flow. They decided to tap into a line of credit they already had with their bank, but they have always kept a zero balance. Again, good management, you have a little bit emergency money. They had never tapped into it, they did. But when they were getting close to the full mark, the maximum amount, because it was just a small line of credit they thought they would never really need anyway, the bank would not really extend more beyond what they needed. And they even used their headquarter building to secure that line of credit. The magnitude of $8 million to $500,000 line of credit. But because banks are rigid, they have to do things a certain way. They couldn't extend it. Fortunately, we were introduced to them. We helped them raise $250,000 on our platform very quickly, and 12-month interest-only loan. And then their interest rate was below 5%. They received donations as well. And then once the building eventually was sold, and in less than 3 months, so they immediately paid off the loan. The outcome means that they bridged over that shortfall and avoided layoffs and program closure. That was one of the options. If they couldn't get the cash flow they needed, the board had decided that, we can't stress, we just have to take action, and layoff and program closure could have been one of the actions they taken. And to me, that would have been a permanent action that to solve a temporary situations. But what other options could they have? And then the third was, they ended up selling the building at that attractive over $3 million sale price. One option was actually to sell it for cheap, just to tell the buyer, hey, instead of 3, we'll sell it to you for 2 or 2.5, and then whatever environmental things that come out is your problem. So that would have been a fire sale, emergency sale. Fortunately, they didn't do it because the environmental report came back clean. It was just delayed. So we helped them avoid that situation, and all they did was to take out that $250,000 loan. You may be wondering who supported them. What did that loan look like? I can't remember the number of people. Maybe a dozen lenders came together and made offers of loan and donation, and willing to provide that flexible capital in the time of need. Okay, I'm going to pause. If you have questions, by the way, keep using the chat box, and then Lynette will interrupt me and tell me if you have questions. I'm going to, in the interest of time, because I want to hear from you guys too later on and have a conversation. So I'll keep flowing. Let me tell you unsuccessful loan. So of course, I'm not going to share who or the specifics of the organization, but this organization also has a very interesting program. They manufacture products engaging women in emerging developing countries to make these products, and then they sell it to big organizations like Targets, Levi's, and just big buyers. And they finance some of the purchase of raw materials with of course money they already had, and then they also have existing bank loans that want to support their program. We were introduced to them, and they were looking for flexible capital. The main potential need or challenge they have is that, they're working just fine. And all of a sudden, let's just pick Target. Target says, we want to order, this big order. And then they would first need to manufacture before they can sell it, right? So then they need that working capital to buy the raw materials. So the plan was, hey, we can take out this cheap loan, maybe source some donations while we're at it. And then when the big big order comes in, we'll manufacture these things. So that was the plan. We assessed them. Even they had 3 other bank loans, we still felt like we could help them. And then we gave them the term sheet with affordable debt and all that. The reason it didn't work out was because they were very mindful of cost, which again, not a bad thing. I don't mean it's a bad thing, but they were perhaps a little too conservative because they wanted to spend money that they had until a point where they felt like, okay, now we need to take out a loan. So by the time they came back to us months later after the term sheet and said, okay, now we're ready. Now we have a big order. We want to take out that loan. We looked at the latest financials, and unfortunately, they had depleted their cash position to a point where we couldn't make that loan anymore. It was no longer at the same financial strength as we had assessed them before. So unfortunately, we had to turn them down. That's to say that it's art and science to try to balance saving money and reducing costs and taking a strategic move and spending some money to get additional capital. There's no magic formula. So that's where our experience comes in. We've turned people away just like this and say, this is not the time to take a loan. You may not be able to afford it. And then there are times when we say, if we craft it like that, we could potentially save you money even more than if you went to a bank. So that's kind of our story about that. I have one rhetorical question, and then I'll see if there are questions again. Sometimes people wonder then well, if I have cash in the bank, why do I need to take out a loan? And that's a very, very valid question. So it depends on what you have planned for the money in the bank. It really is excess cash flow. They're not earmarked for your operations. They're not earmarked for contingencies. Yeah, by all means, spend that money first. Don't take out a loan. But sometimes it's there are so many balls you're trying to juggle on limited resource, and you don't know when that other funding is going to come in, all those things. Sometimes it becomes necessary to plan for a loan, even if when you have cash in the bank. We're working with a school that actually has quite a bit of cash, not sitting around, but cash to the tune of millions, because they have been preparing for a big spend on real estate. So sometimes it just needs to be there, and sometimes it should be spent. All right, any questions in the chat box, Lynette, before I go on?
I actually have a question. I actually have 2 questions. One is that, when anybody buying house, when you are getting a mortgage, you all have the credit score for your individual finance. So for this situation, how do you look at the credit score of the nonprofit if they never borrow, right? Of course, I know you know the financial, but if you can explain that a little bit. Second question I have is that the example you had before regarding that selling the property in order to get cash flow. In different scenarios, say this nonprofit own the property and that they have so many tenants are nonprofit too, and those little tenants actually cannot pay the rent because right now nobody can work from the office. And if there's a way to do the pool funding for nonprofit property owner whose tenants happen to be nonprofit, small business owner, or low-income resident, is there a way to strategize that package in order to be a loan package and everybody can benefit from, right? Because we don't know how long we're going to all working from home, not being in the office, right? People thinking about their rent costs and so many things they are not using, but they have to pay, they cannot pay, all of that. So this is the 2 questions I have.
All right, fantastic questions. And they actually are related. So the first one is about, how do we assess nonprofit credit score or not? There is no credit score that is, I think there are some services out there. It's not like what we're used to, the 700s credit score or something like that. We look at the financials. And by the way, we look at it from a lens very similar to how banks look at it as the first pass. what we would be looking for as in terms of financial strength is both the cash position as well as a cash flow. Sometimes people will use the term cash flow lender. Lenders look to the borrower to see if they can see a cash flow pattern come in to afford a loan, because loan basically is borrowing from the future, not just with us, right? The concept of loan is borrowing from the future. If by borrowing from the future, you're just fast tracking the money so you can spend it now, if that actually enables additional revenue going forward, that definitely is great. Second potential is it enables cost reduction. That's also a great thing. So a quick example, a nonprofit we did worked with before, their strategic move was to move from lease property to purchase property because the leases were going up. In the Bay Area, probably in LA too, for the past few years, rent has been just going up like crazy. And the most recent year for them at that time, 1 year jump was 30%. And they were leasing these properties. They say, you know what, we have a piece of land, let's just build on it. So strategically, they borrowed at low interest rate so that they can cap the expenses for real estate. So we look at the financial statements, we look at the Form 990, and we talk to the nonprofit and assess anything that's not on paper to understand the big picture to assess our own credit score. Now, how that relates to your second question is actually the second question, we can just spend even one talk on it, because that is the exact innovation that I'm talking about. Sometimes, we are put in a situation, maybe not planned for, but could we pivot to something that's interesting? When a larger nonprofit owns a space and they're subletting to other nonprofits, of course, the larger nonprofit is squeezed in the middle when the smaller nonprofits can't pay. 2020 is like the poster child of something like that. The risk that going into this may look good, like, oh, we'll do all that. And then when it comes to shove, you still have to pay your mortgage and your renters can't pay you. So yes, definitely, probably I would say there are ways to evaluate this. This is very custom designed depending on how the revenue sources of the underlying nonprofits, whether they, looks like they're still going to come in, whether rent will resume, or are there other things that need to come together to present them as one. I love the idea of presenting as one because I'm doing another talk in 2 weeks, and instead of strategic borrowing, the talk is about strategic philanthropy. Just like I said before, there are a lot of philanthropists that are now brainstorming. I am tapped out. I've donated all I can. In fact, it's been more than all the past years. I want to do more. Tell me how I can do more and easily that I can do more. So presenting them with a collective, like here are the causes that you probably care about because it's in your neighborhood, because they're all about arts or all about, Asian Americans, that can make the ask a lot stronger. So yes, the answer is yes, there are ways, but we would evaluate them on one-off and present a more custom solution. Let me see, let me check on time. How are we doing? Okay, I'm gonna have to move a little faster. Finca International is an ongoing loan. So rather than spending time on this page, let me just very quickly go to give you a visual of how, let me get out of this, how we present borrowers to the lenders, how we tell the story. Let's see, Finca. Finca International is a very large and established nonprofit. They have over $100 million in net assets. So the question is, why are they borrowing from us at $1.2 million stretched out in maybe 3 loan closing? That's their strategic decision. They have a subsidiary that is helping low-income families in rural Uganda by providing them with clean energy to put solar energy into homes. So we tell the story like that. Here's a program summary. The goal is to eliminate electricity access gap. Investors get to see this. It's a $1.2 million note total. Their ceiling rate, remember we call it ceiling rate because they can offer lower, is 4.25%. This is a 3-year term loan, and the collateral is they have cash. So Mothership Finca International has cash. So they're using that to secure the loan for the subsidiary. Reasons to support. Sorry, I'm going to go a little faster. And then we invite people to participate. For as little as $100, they can participate with a loan. Anybody can donate any amount they want. And then, so that's a quick overview of how we present it. Let me see. If there's interest, I can show, kind of like once logged in, what people see, how they make offers. But rather than doing that right now, let me come back to, the presentation. Where am I? Oops, here. So Finca International is an idea of how to engage donors differently. We've helped them engage a new donor that did not know about them before, but felt so compelled by their program that they decided to use their donor advised fund to make a sizable loan to Finca International under these terms. So that's fantastic. They used our platform and shared with another foundation that already has an existing loan program to nonprofits. And it looks like they will get approved for $300,000 of this loan to Finca for their operating cost. So we already raised about 1 year's worth of working capital for them in the 3 months time we did with the first close. So that's definitely a strategic move that we want to encourage and introduce to people. So action steps. There are 2 things, and this is the final slide, 2 things I would suggest everybody to think about, because revenue, and if the opportunity for 2020 is what I'm thinking like is the key, that is leverage off of the donor engagement now with your new donors, as well as new ways to engage donors. For major donors, if they're on your board, potentially, if you have the strategic plans that everybody's still on board, and now just like, help us get some cheaper capital with the board guarantee, you can get there too, like some of our borrowers. A way to engage tapped out donors that are with donor advised fund or foundation, talk to them about potential loan and how, under some circumstances, they could convert that loan to a donation to you. Just like a PPP, maybe, once we get to that point, whether it's time or program success, then, would you then at that time convert that to a donation? In foundation terminology, that's PRI, program related investments, but we are just describing it in layman's term. And then don't forget the crowdfunded solutions. It can be for loan crowdfunding or donation funding. I think that you guys are all familiar with crowdfunded donations. But expanding beyond current donor base is so important. The article I cited said that majority of the increase in 2020, the donation increase, the 7.5% they talked about, came from donors that made donations of $250 or less. That means generally the smaller donors that have maybe not done a lot, now everybody's trying to step up. What are some ways to harness that energy is one way to think about them. Don't forget them. And then, of course, convert them to, once they come in, don't convert them to sustained donors. And then if you work with Lendonate, that's a strategic way to engage these donors first as a lender, and then potentially make that strategic ask to convert that to donation. Our lenders on their dashboard has a button on the bottom that says convert to donation. We don't hide the fact that we want people to be philanthropic and we want to make it easy for them. If I made a $5,000 loan to somebody and I'm looking on my dashboard and this year at near year end, I want to make more donations, that button makes it so much easier and say, keep $1,000 of that. That's my donation to you this year. So I'm sorry, I'm kind of probably spent a little too much time earlier, so I'm pressing for time now. We definitely want to engage you further for conversations, for questions. Lynette, if you don't mind putting our emails in the chat box, reach out to us anytime, even just for a free quick consultation and to look at your financials. We'd be more than happy to do that. I'm going to take myself off of share screen so I can see you. Okay, great. Thanks. Any, I know we're, any questions, any last minute comments? Maybe Christine, you can help us to see if, you know, manage time a little bit. I know that everybody has more things to do. Christine, why don't you take us to the close?
Sure, no problem. And I know that, again, can be a potentially sensitive topic. You know, we wanted to make this a confidential space as much as possible. So I do acknowledge that several of our nonprofits have already reached out to Lynette. So as Vivian so generously offered, Lend Donate is open for consultations, because we know that there are a lot of hard questions that our nonprofits are having to ask during this time. This pandemic has gone on for 7 months, and it'll go through the end of the year, and maybe who knows how long it'll go into next year. So with that comes a lot of questions around your budget, about your revenue stream, about your working capital, and potentially looking at loans and making those kinds of hard decisions. So we hope that this presentation with Vivian and Lynette being with us here today provided some very useful information. I know that I learned a lot about like what can be some very strategic choices that our nonprofits can make when it comes to making sure that you have what you need to continue to provide services and programs for our communities in need. We know that you know, trying to work with different donors and potentially with lenders, that this is a very wonderful opportunity that Lend Donate is offering to try to connect our nonprofits to those kinds of potential loans as well as donations. So we want to thank Vivian and Lynette for joining us today and for offering your expertise, for knowing what you know, what's really going on with our nonprofits and having a heart for our API communities and the nonprofits that you serve. So just want to thank Vivian and Lynette. We do have evaluations. We're going to be sharing our link on the chat box. So please feel free to let us know how we did. We'll be sharing this information with our speakers as well. And after you fill out that evaluation, you will be directed to the presentation slides. So again, once you fill out that evaluation form, you'll get the presentation slides. And after this webinar is over, we will send out a follow-up email with Lynette and Vivian's contact information, as well as a copy of this session's recording. So I do also want to share that we have another upcoming webinar with the Alzheimer's Los Angeles. It's on culturally relevant support for API families with dementia. We know, again, because of the pandemic, that these are very difficult times for our older adults that are dealing with dementia and their family caregivers, whether they're living with them or trying to check up on them remotely away from their homes. Because of the pandemic, we're not able to check in and to visit our older family members as much as we would like to. And we know that a lot of our API nonprofits are helping families reaching out to their older parents and grandparents that are dealing with dementia. So we're very happy to invite Alzheimer's Los Angeles next Wednesday, October 14th at 11 a.m. So exactly a week from today and this time for a webinar looking at all the different support and resources that are out there, especially being done in a virtual environment, in checking in on our most vulnerable API older adults that are dealing with dementia and Alzheimer's disease. So we hope that you can join us. There will be a link to that as well. My colleague Carrie put both the links for the evaluation for today's webinar, as well as the registration form for next week's workshop. So we hope that you can join us for that one as well. Again, thank you so much, Vivian and Lynette, for joining us today, and for all of the organizations that came today to explore this option. We know that these are very trying times, so we're very pleased to be able to bring this type of resource to you, and we hope that there can be many happy matches to be made between nonprofits as borrowers and the philanthropically minded lenders that are out there, thanks to Lend Donate. So thank you again so much for joining us, and hope you have a good rest of your day. Vivian and Lynette, I'm just going to ask you to stay on for a few minutes longer. Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a good rest of your day.